voices blending, melodies ascending, harmony in the air. Our songs are never ending. In the barbershop we create magic. Brad and John show, yeah, it's pure classic. No instruments needed, just our vocal range. Notes flying high, it's our musical exchange. Tracy's station may try, but they can't compete. Our barbershop style, it can't be beat. Oh, the harmony of voices, so sweet. In the barbershop of life, our tunes will repeat. No need for instruments, no need for a band. Just the Brad and John show, the finest in the land.
It is the BS show for June 6th, D-Day. And we'll talk about that later, but an incredible day that turned the tide of World War II. Lots of Americans died on this day. Unfortunately, not too many people recognize it anymore, but we'll talk about it a little bit later. I'm here with John Combest, who, did you get the Bill Gates curse this morning, or is your team's going to work this morning?
The Bill Gates curse is better than the Irish curse, Brad. Thankfully, I've been able to avoid both of them. And if you don't mind, I'll correct you, Brad. This is not the BS show. This is the BJ show.
I'm sorry. I said I still get that all messed up. Okay, John, things to talk about. We'll talk about this in B block. I had an interesting night last night. I was at the multi-chamber event at the Foundry Arts Center. There were like 8 or 9 chambers there. Of course, the Westplex Chamber was not invited, but I showed up and did my best as I could. And, talked to a lot of people and met some interesting people and have some interesting things to talk about. But you know what? I'm getting a little bit frustrated, John, because of the fact that, I'm like the newest kid on the block with my Westplex Chamber. By the way, westplex.com. It's free to join. First 100 members. I think we're up to like 82 or something like that. One of the other chamber presidents, and I won't say who it was, walked up to me and said,
"What would you do with a brain if you had one?"
You're 5 for 5, Brad, every day this week. Are you going to play another old-timey movie clips next week? Or are you going to pick, maybe like a Charlie Chaplin or maybe like a talkie you could find a line from?
When you're using a drag queen to recruit for the Navy, that's not the people we want. What we need is alpha males and alpha females who are going to rip out their own guts, eat them, and ask for seconds. Those are young men and women that are going to win wars.
I didn't play that one for a while. But I did. Then I went to what do they call that? What did the deal they call that last night? Niall Stevens. What was the name of his event he was doing last night? What was that called? The roundup or the legislation?
Yeah, I think it was probably like a legislative wrap-up. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Lots of stuff to talk about that. I think I did you get the pictures I sent you last night?
I got a picture and a video from you, yeah, and I couldn't tell where they were from until I zoomed in, and then I saw that you were clearly at the Lodge at the Pear.
Yes, Lodge at the Pear, and the protesters were out in force, and with expensive signs. Did you see those signs with the various politicians?
They were prefab, yeah.
Yes.
Hopefully they were union made. Hopefully there wasn't any scab labor that went into that. You know?
We'll talk about that later. But what's really interesting at the chamber event, I'm bouncing back and forth again here. Guess who I ran into who had wonderful comments about this show?
What are their initials?
NP. And I'll give you a hint. The first name is Nick.
That would either be the great Nicholas Phillips, or it would not be our dear friend, rest in peace, Nick Pister. NP, I don't know, Brad.
Nick Perryman.
Oh, Nick Perryman, yeah.
Yeah, and he was there and talked to him. He's with Greater St. Louis Inc. And I got the scoop on this. First off, 2 amazing things. Greater St. Louis Inc. must have some serious money. Tim Brinker has not moved into, you would think, since he's now the head guy at Greater St. Louis Inc., isn't that what he is? Like the Grand Poobah or something like that?
Yeah, you would call him the Grand Poobah, yeah.
He still lives in Franklin County. John, do you have a problem with that?
No, why would you?
Well, that would be like if you're the mayor of Chicago, you lived in Springfield. You know what I mean? It would be like...
Well, part of the idea... Hold on now, Brad. I think the great Nick Perryman would probably explain this to you. The idea of Greater St. Louis doesn't mean St. Louis City. It means the St. Louis region.
Well, but the interesting part of that is that having spent my fair share of time in Franklin County, the Franklin County people don't recognize that they're part of the St. Louis area.
Maybe that's the point of bringing in great people like Tim Brinker. By the way, we'd be remiss if we didn't point out, Brad, that a year ago, Nick Perryman was helping get Mike Kehoe elected governor when a lot of people still thought that Jay Ashcroft was the front runner in that race. Remember that, Brad? There were people that said, well, nobody can beat Ashcroft with his name ID.
I do. And matter of fact, you know what on his business cards, I have his business card right here in front of me. Nick Perryman, you know what his job is according to the business card?
Does it say, I don't know. I was going to make fun of Brad somehow. What does it say, Brad?
Manager Government Relations. So he's still...
Nice. Yeah. Very
but
good.
But the other thing he told me is that they bought Augie Bush III's helicopter, and they now fly Tim Brinker back and forth between Franklinville, Franklin County, and downtown St. Louis. Matter of fact, they had a problem. They've had a couple times. They have a landing pad outside their office down there in downtown St. Louis, and every once in a while the helicopter has to hover as they clear off the homeless people. So the homeless people sort of just because somehow or another they're attracted to that big H that's just painted on the helicopter.
Who knows? What does that stand for, Brad?
Well, in aviation it stands for helicopter, but the homeless people, I think it stands for something else. Okay, that's John Combest. The reason John Combest is here is because we do this every Friday morning. We have a special edition with the Barbershop Boys, and then we bring in the Polka Boys.
Time for the John Combest Top 3.
And here he is. He puts together this incredible list every single day of his life. But what we do is we start the show off in the morning with the top 3. Yes, the important aspects. There may be 30, 40, 50 different important stories, but these are the creme de la creme. We bring this guy in. Sir, what's your name again?
I'm Casey Kasem.
And what do you do?
Now on with the countdown.
And we start off with?
In third place.
One of those issues that Nick and the other folks and Tim and the other folks at Greater St. Louis Inc. keep a close eye on is control of the St. Louis police. Will there be a board of folks that is selected by the governor that decides how the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department is run? We've talked about it a lot since the origin of the show, Brad. And yesterday, there was another event. Yes, community organizers have decided they're going to take another crack at trying to end what they call state control of the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department. Excuse me. Local activists. Brad, have you heard of Arch City Defenders before?
I know a lot about Arch City Defenders, probably more than I should. Yes, I know exactly who they are, and I've actually talked to, I don't think he's there anymore, but the guy that originally started it.
Well, yeah, and, the great Jane Duker refers to them as the Arch City Defunders, which I always think is pretty funny, because her insistence is that they always want to go after law enforcement and reduce the amount of money that's actually spent on cops on the beat. So a press conference yesterday announced that Arch City Defenders is suing. They're really following in the footsteps of that first Megan Green lawsuit, quibbling with some of the language in the state takeover. But perhaps most interestingly, or maybe importantly, you have a longtime activist in the city named Jamala Rogers. Most folks, if you recognize that name, it's because she was a longtime columnist for the St. Louis American. She may still be at the St. Louis American. I'm not sure. This piece, by the way, is brought to us in the Post-Dispatch by Katie Cole. And she says, Rogers blasted the takeover effort as a way for white Republican lawmakers to unfairly exert power over a city that didn't vote for them. Here's the quote from Jamala Rogers. "We have a state legislature that says, we don't care what you want." And AG Andrew Bailey responded. He said, instead of filing frivolous lawsuits, this group should focus its efforts on making St. Louis safer. So it seems this is never going to end, Brad. One lawsuit begins and then it ends. And then another one begins and activists have a little party. And I don't think this will have much consequence.
You know, the interesting thing about this is what I found sort of fascinating is, as I understand the original intent, and this was turned on to me by a friend of mine who was a very, very, at the time, a very high-ranking Missouri official. I actually know those kind of people, John, if you don't believe that or not. And they actually talk to me from time to time. But she turned me on to the Arch City Defenders as sort of like the white knights of the legal system who were coming in and helping out the downtrodden. Now, why would if that is true, why would they be against the police? Don't you think they would be somewhat for the police because the police are trying to keep law and order in the city? Or am I missing something?
Yeah, I think you're missing a lot. And I think that a group like Arch City Defenders, if I recall correctly, they originally came about because they were fighting issues like tenants complaining about landlords, I think is one of the things. And I think that Jane Duker and others have done the quote unquote follow the money thing about how they're funded and who is funding them. Like, I mean, from the get-go, though, Brad, after their thing about landlords and tenants, I just presumed that they were generally anti-police funding.
Okay, you're probably right, but I thought they were for sort of like, this is my problem. I look at them as sort of for the greater good. You know what I'm saying? And to me...
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's naive. And I think, Brad, too, it might also be instructive of if one person who might have some status as a lawyer or something tells you something, to maybe not take it at face value and maybe look at another source or two,
I could look at Wikipedia, right?
Yeah, that actually, Brad, knowing you'd put it in Chat GPT, copy paste it, and then take credit for it yourself.
Boy, John, and the compliments just keep on coming.
Up a notch to number 2.
Jason Rosenbaum of St. Louis Public Radio did a little bit of original reporting, Brad. That's his signature. He's out there actually talking to elected officials. Headline from St. Louis Public Radio today. Hawley says FEMA is, quote, slow walking disaster declaration requests, but he's pushing Trump. The pronoun there would be Josh Hawley. And I think Jason does a good job of laying out exactly what Hawley says. So Hawley's point is the Trump administration cannot approve or affirm or confirm, however you want to call it, disaster money until FEMA gives it its stamp of approval. So we saw, and Josh Hawley subtly takes credit for this, he says that after a period of time from those March and April storms, he talked to President Trump, and that President Trump soon afterwards got FEMA to approve the disaster declaration, and then Trump could give it the stamp of approval, and then money could come here. So Jason, as he does, pressed Hawley on it, and is like, what is going on with this? Like, don't you think, later in the interview, Jason shows the transcript, Jason presses him and is like, don't you think that the federal government could learn from the local folks about acting a little bit more nimbly? And Hawley says, quote, this is a terrific point. And the truth is that we do things differently for tornadoes than hurricanes, for example. Now, Hawley's big point here is that the slow walking of these disaster declarations doesn't just happen with the St. Louis tornadoes, that it's happening all around the country. And Hawley's thing is, look, they're slow walking it. Somebody's got to lean on FEMA and say, what is taking so long for you guys to do this paperwork? So in other words, I guess what Hawley is saying is, don't blame Trump for this. Blame FEMA for this. And somebody, including Trump, needs to lean on FEMA to get the system working better.
John, the interesting thing is, you sort of schooled me on this, and I had some of the other as well, too, that said, Brad, you were talking about the fact that FEMA should be here, and they should be here like within hours after events like this. And they said, aren't you the guy who's not necessarily for federal government being involved all the time? Well, if they got the money and they got the clout, they need to be here. But, this whole crazy thing, I don't understand this. I don't understand it. If the alarm bell goes off at the firehouse, they don't sit there and think, well, do we have the paperwork to drive the truck? Did the truck pass inspection? Has everybody got their all their shots up to date? Everybody, they jump on their truck and they head to the fire. Get what I'm saying?
I get what you're saying, but I think also, now in defense of FEMA here, Brad, I think most FEMA management, I guess that's redundant, would assume that local people that the local governments are taking care of actually making sure people are not trapped in buildings, et cetera. And if FEMA's job is to provide a whole bunch of money and then some boots on the ground, I don't think FEMA are first responders. Now, I could be reading I could be interpreting their charter wrong, which I haven't read, to be clear. But I don't think FEMA's point are to be first responders. I think they're to provide money from federal taxpayers and then also have some, know-how of how to rebuild a city after a disaster.
No, I totally understand, and I agree 100% with what you're saying. But there should be a group of FEMA people who are literally second responders, to the point where if there's a tornado that comes through St. Louis like it did, and the news hits Washington, D.C. 2 or 3 hours later, these guys should be one set of boots on the ground to at least assess what's going on. Okay, you first responders, good. You got that guy trapped in the house. Remember, they got that one guy out that his house collapsed on him. Great. Okay. And then look at the mayor, look at the chief of police, look at the fire chief and say, okay, I'm here for the government, and I'm actually here to help. What can I do? Get what I'm saying?
I get what you're saying. And I think if you're FEMA, you probably say, cool story, Brad, but we just sent people to Florida and California and Washington and Maryland. And how many people do you want us to hire?
John, I love how supportive you are of all my ideas.
No, if you're FEMA, that's what you say, Brad. You have people like Brad Hildebrand that say the government is too big. And then you say that we should have a team of people who's ready to be second responders. What about the people in Florida? Where do we send people?
John,
do we move everybody from Florida to St. Louis?
John, if Mr. FEMA called me up right now and said, Brad, we don't have any money to pay you, but we want to make you our official second responder. We're going to, can you get a place near the St. Louis airport, and can you get to the point where, better yet, can you move out to Chesterfield and live near Spirit so we can have you hop on
I would not want you in Chesterfield. Can you imagine the property values if you moved out here?
We want you to hop on one of our private jets, and we want to be a second responder, and we're not going to pay you anything. I'd say, where do I sign? That's
well, you're known for not making money, Brad. You know who would be benefited by having a quick group of people in an autopen would be subject story number 1.
And that would be Dan Borgmeyer from St. Charles?
Yes, it is, Brad, a guy that probably doesn't return your calls.
I met with him last night, believe it or not. I'll tell about that later.
The number one.
Senator Eric Schmitt on Fox News talking about the autopen situation. And you and I have talked about it for a while, Brad, this controversy here that President Joe Biden was using an autopen to make some very serious decisions. I guess I should say Joe Biden wasn't using the autopen, but somebody was in charge. And coming up on June 18th, Senator Eric Schmitt and Senator John Cornyn will begin investigations into who was actually behind the decisions that were made. To quote Eric Schmitt on Fox News, who had their fingers on the nuclear codes? Who was actually making these decisions? June 18th, Senate Judiciary Committee. Eric Schmitt and friends are going to begin asking questions, Brad. And I have a series of pieces up today on my website about that very story.
John, they don't have to spend any money. I already know. I think everybody knows. You know who was behind it all?
I think it was, now you would cynically say it was Joe Biden, or you might have a different punchline. Who was behind it, Brad?
It was Dr. Jill. Everybody knows that. Come on.
It was Dr. Jill. And remember, doctor is in quotes because she's not a real doctor.
Well, don't tell that to Whoopi Goldberg. Remember when she first became first woman or first lady, whatever. Whoopi said, we need to make her Surgeon General.
Yeah, well, she does have doctor in the name. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, she's got that EDD degree, which you make fun of. I still haven't found out. I've not been able to find out if she has an EDD or a PhD. So because
Have you gone to ChatGPT? Have you gone to according to AI.com? Or has that not been updated in a month?
No, I hadn't updated it the other day. By the way, John, in B Block, a number of things to talk about. B Block, and maybe you can do this over the break. There was a story Wednesday about KDHX filing their lawsuit, trying to get the bankruptcy court to get stayed or whatever. Is there a way you could send that to me? Or was that an interview? Or was that? I didn't see it. I think I looked yesterday in your thing, and I don't think I saw it. Was that? Did I miss it?
Okay, you say there was a story. Can you be a little more vague? Was it on television, radio?
No.
Was it in a newspaper?
No. I should have prefaced this by saying Post-Dispatch because I don't have a subscription to the Post-Dispatch. I can look at the front page, on their website. You can't look at any of the stories, but you can look at the headlines and things like that. It was the top headline on Wednesday evening.
Yeah, you surprised me yesterday because you quoted two You quoted 2 Post-Dispatch stories yesterday, and I know that you're so much of a hobo that you're not going to subscribe. And I wondered how you had actually read those stories.
John, can I tell you something?
Yeah.
I did a John Combest sneaky maneuver.
You went to, now, unfortunately, Brad, I'm sure you did the thing where you put it in, you asked ChatGPT and it gave you a generic summary. The problem with that is a lot of times when you ask ChatGPT about something behind a paywall, it's not accurate.
I went to archive.is and I researched it, but I've tried to find it.
Wow, where'd you learn that from, Brad?
From John Combest. I tried to find the KDHH.
Oh, wow. I just sent you the article. Check your Westplex email.
My Westplex email. Okay, we have to take a break. John's off to a great start. Man, I got stuff to talk about from the night last night. And once again, was interesting last night with the deal at the Taj Mahal in De Pere. There were not one set of protesters. There were 2 sets of protesters last night. Do you know why that is, John? Guess why?
Why is that?
There's 2 entrances to the place. There's a entrance, was off at De Pere Road. There's one entrance on the west side and one entrance on the east side of the Taj Mahal there in De Pere. And there were 2 sets of protesters, very well organized. But after the protest was over, one of the guys came over and talked to me, and it was a fascinating conversation. And
well, here's the thing, Brad. Yeah, I mean, did he think that you were an actual journalist? Did you tell him that you have TWJDs?
I have 2 worthless journalism degrees.
There you go. We should just start saying Tujada. It would save everybody time when you give your Camille Winter speech.
Camille Winter, best professor ever. Okay,